Hi, I am Dave. I'm just some asshole on the internet. I'm not a therapist or anything like that. I'm just some fucking asshole on the internet. But I would like to help you with your problems, which is kind of crazy. But throughout my life, I've known a lot of people, and the same things seem to afflict all of them. Maybe not all of them, but a significant percent. The percentage is big enough that, I don't know, worries me. So here I am, offering my assistance without flash, without fanfare, just because I give a fuck about you. I don't know. I may not know who you are, but I still give a fuck about you. And before I get started on this fucking journey, I want to tell you who I am. My name's Dave, obviously. I'm closer to 50 than 40. Uh, I was born in Germany, Frankfurt specifically, to an American soldier father and an English mother. I spent most of my childhood living in Germany with during the Cold War, and my dad had a job that was important to him and was important in that context, and that job took a lot of time from him, and it took a lot of energy from him, and didn't leave a lot for the rest. And my mom has her own issues. So I was brought up outside of America, watching Armed Forces Network, AFN Europe, hey, and the propaganda that it contained instead of commercials. And unfortunately, like, what I'm trying to say is I grew up relatively isolated, both culturally and emotionally. There wasn't a lot of dads around, and dads were fucking scary because they were all soldiers, you know? And it wasn't that they went out to get the milk, it's that, I don't know, they were out in the field somewhere. I didn't generally know where my dad was. Maybe he was in one or two places I might have known, but my mom was not emotionally available to me, and that's something I'll come back and talk about later. But I came to America seeing America more like, I would say more in line with how a foreigner would feel coming to America. The America that I knew was the idealized version of America that I saw in my brain. You know, that the idealized version of America that I was shown. And I believed, and I still believe, in the America that I imagined before I came here. When I first came here, well, it was technically the second time, but when I was old enough to recognize that I was here, I was appalled, honestly. We lived for a little while in Barstow, California, and about a year and a half in the very early 90s. And I spent 2.5 years living in El Paso after that. And I was young, so it wasn't something that I really thought about. But my first impression of America was, what the fuck? Like, I mean, I grew up definitely not wealthy. That's, anybody knows how the military gets paid will understand. Like, most folks just have enough to get by. You know, they don't have enough to be anything that you would consider wealthy. But I think as you progress through the ranks, I mean, you feel better about what you make, but it's not anything that the average American would consider wealthy. To coming back here, you know, growing up Army brat in Europe, not everybody had the same thing, but everybody had enough. And we had available support structures in place to help people in need. And I don't feel like there was shame, both when I was a child serving in Europe, nor when I was a young soldier. I don't think that there was any shame in using the lending closet at ACS or something. Army Community Services, for those that don't know. There's not any, there's Army emergency relief available to help soldiers. Yeah, it's a loan they got to pay back, but it's a special program for military, and it's been very beneficial. I don't know what the status of it is today. I haven't had for 20 years. But I'm telling you how my childhood and my youth was in that regard. So to see the poverty and just the general state of disrepair of everything in America was really shocking. And it still to this day is. The inequality that I saw then is so much more widespread and uncomfortable today than it was then. I spent a little bit of time in Canada, a year and a half, living in Canada, Oromocto, New Brunswick. Shout out to my Canadian friends. I still think about Donairs, and that period in my life is one of the fondest periods in my life. But mostly because of the good friends and the good memories that I made there in comparison to the memories that I made in America, which were generally less awesome. Still some good, but less awesome. From there, I was a high school dropout, and didn't really know what the hell I was going to do. I was drinking and smoking a lot of pot, and I don't know, I was more concerned with living than going to school, but education has always been critically important to me. But to transition from the Department of Defense school system, where I was already beginning to struggle because of my emotional state, into the American public school system, that was traumatic. Even 30 years ago, American schools were letting our fucking children down. They're a damn sight better than they are today. But the writing has been on the wall for a long time. It's just we choose to ignore it and hope for the best. Anyway, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was I think about 2 years older than I was. And I remember thinking, holy shit, this guy's a burnout. And I don't want to be him. What do I got to do to not be him? And it didn't take me long to figure out, because I come from a long line of losers, to quote a great song. You know, and the military is a way out of that life for a lot of people, just like it was for my own father. And I made the decision right there on the spot that I was going to quit smoking pot. I was going to get my GED, and I was going to join the Army, and I was not going to be my friend. No. So I made that choice right there. And between my 17th birthday, which is the middle of March, by the end of July, I had already done my GED. I had already enlisted in the Army. I hadn't gone to MEPS yet, but I'd already gone and enlisted, done the initial stuff. By September, I went to MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Facility, where they do your physicals and blah, blah, blah. And the only time I ever asked my dad for help, they wanted me to enlist for a job that was not what I wanted. And I called my dad to talk to him because he was still serving. He was in the career field that I wanted to enter. And I didn't know what to do, you know, because when you're in that office with the career counselor alone, you are responsible. You make your choice like a grown-up, you know. But sometimes even grown-ups need a little advice before they make a decision, and that's what I felt. And I talked to my dad, and my dad asked to speak with the career counselor. I don't know what they said to each other, but when they got off the phone, the career counselors offered me the job that I wanted. The problem was the job required me to leave for basic training before Christmas. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to have that Christmas break in the middle of my basic training. So I went with my second choice, which was to be a 19 kilo Abrams tank crew member. And that's what my dad was. My first choice, I wanted to be a 19 Delta Cavalry Scout. But I could get into being a tanker and leave after Christmas, which was perfect. So I turned 18 in basic training. And I lived that life. I went to basic training in late January 1997 at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I learned a lot. You know, it reinforced all through my childhood. I heard about these Army values, you know, and I heard about what was right and wrong from these military commercials on AFN, like things like operational security and don't cause maneuver damage, be responsible, don't drink and drive, don't sexually harass women, don't sexually harass anyone. These are the kind of commercials that I grew up. If you want to see, there are AFN commercials from the 80s on YouTube. When I entered the Army, they don't brainwash people, right? Anybody that's played organized sports will understand on some degree how military entrance training works. and what it's trying to foster. The same sense of teamwork and selflessness that you would experience playing high school football, or maybe softball or soccer or baseball. But that same sense of belonging and the same cohesiveness and the same selflessness that comes with playing sports. And if you never played sports, it's not that hard to understand. You could do it. But that's not what this is about. From the time I entered the military until the time I left the military, I didn't really have a whole bunch of involvement in American society because I was busy doing other shit. You know, I was training, or I was in the motor pool at work, and the internet wasn't what it like it is now. We didn't have cell phone. Everybody didn't have a cell phone in their pocket. You know what I mean? You existed in the world around you far more than you existed in any world that was over there. And by over there, I mean anywhere. But additionally, I don't know, I was a young person. I just wasn't interested in the bigger pictures. I was interested in the world around me, the world that I was immersed in. And yeah, context here. I served at Fort Lewis for a little while, but I quickly left there and was stationed in Schweinfurt, Germany, good old pig town. And while I was there, we maintained the same kind of tempo that I experienced as a young soldier at Fort Lewis. I was busy. Shit was happening in the world. I got to Germany, and just a couple of weeks after I got there, we had those 2 embassy bombings in 1998. And instead of doing my job, we all secured our community, for lack of a more complex way to put it. You know, so I spent time focused on that, on the safety and security of my community, though it wasn't on my mind in that way. Mostly I was just like, man, this sucks. But hindsight. During my time in Germany, I got the honor of being in one of the first units to deploy to Kosovo in '99 to help prevent genocide and stop the ethnic violence that was happening there. And it was very impactful on me. Very impactful on me. As a child growing up, my mom was a stranger in a strange land, just like I was a stranger in a strange land. So she didn't interact with many people, you know, and that's on her. So growing up in Germany, I did not get immersed in German culture. I was an observer more than anything, just what I can see out my window. You know, we're out the window at school, or, you know, even though the community was directly across the street, it was across the street. And it's still a Western, what you would think of as a Western country. You know, it was beautiful and clean, and I think very, very highly of Germany and of Europe as a whole. And this trip to Kosovo for me let me see A lot more. I rode a ship from Bremerhaven, Germany, the USNS Bob Hope. Everybody called it the Hopeless Bob. I rode it from Bremerhaven, Germany, through the North Sea and the English Channel and all that. We went through the Strait of Gibraltar at midnight, and it was amazing. Amazing. It was just this looming blackness in the dark. It was, you couldn't see it, but you could see it. And I saw trash floating in the middle of the Mediterranean. It was so blue, but there was trash, and I was like, what the fuck, man? But we weren't talking about that yet back then, not like we are today, you know? But we landed in Thessaloniki, Greece, and I didn't really see much of Greece, just what you could see from the harbor, and that's a story for another day. But we rode from there to a temporary camp that was set up outside of Skopje, Macedonia. And I'm not going to lie, I don't remember the ride there because I was snoring the whole way in the back seat of a tank transporter. I mean, put your baby in the car, go for a drive, see what happens. Baby falls asleep, right? Happens grown-ups too. But, so I didn't really get to see Skopje because we were in a big grassy field up on the side of a mountain above it. But I could see it down there, you know what I mean? And we went from there into Kosovo, and I was stationed at Camp Monteith on the edge of Gilan, Kosovo. And it was eye-opening. Eye-opening. As a child, we went and drove through. I'd lived in Berlin while the Berlin Wall was still up. My dad was in Fox Company 40th Armor, and I was just a baby. And I have some memories from there of seeing the wall and stuff. And I got to take a trip into Berlin in 87 or 88 with the Boy Scouts, which was really amazing. What I'm trying to say is that I got to see what East Berlin looked like to some degree. And we took a trip into East Germany after the wall came down to see what it looked like. And I was shocked at how behind it seemed. It was like it was stuck in the 1940s, what I saw, compared to, and not in East Berlin. East Berlin just seemed older. But when we took that trip into Eastern Germany after the wall came down, I was just shocked by how everything looked so 1940s. It looked like something out of the history books or out of movies or TV or something, you know? And when I went to Kosovo, it was way more extreme than that. You know, I saw people building their houses out of cob bricks. You know, I saw people living in the poorest conditions that I had ever seen. And not uniformly. You know, the city was like the city, but when we went to some of the outlying towns, it was pretty eye-opening for a young American that had never seen that level of poverty before, that level of struggle before. And I definitely suffered some trauma in that place. So it was a little bit of a mixed bag, you know? But it definitely gave me a dibby-dab of the PTSD. I didn't realize it at the time because I was young and dumb and I was a soldier, you know? I was a warrior. God, I've never called myself that out loud, and I'm not comfortable with it, but it's true. And I didn't recognize that I was hurting. And then I came back to the States, I got into the wrong marriage, and I had a daughter who I love very much. But I was still living that life, that same life that my dad led. I was always gone. I was always in the field or on the other side of the country training or on duty, or just pick something. Home was not where you would usually find me. And that's a hard way to raise a family. It's not a healthy way to raise a family. I have talked for way too long already.